Hi there, welcome to Chapter 10 of your Business and Finance course. Chapter 10 is going to be looking at the structure and regulation of the accountancy profession. So we're going to consider the different bodies, we'll think about regulation in a bit more detail. We will have a pretty in-depth look at the kind of disciplinary procedures. We'll work through the ICAW disciplinary procedure, and that should give you a good overview then of this kind of regulation aspect. In Chapter 9, we would have discussed the different things that the ICAW does to try and maintain a high level of the kind of accounting profession, and this is one of those aspects. Okay, so first thing we're going to look at is just the overall structure of the accounting profession, both kind of domestically in the UK and Ireland, and then internationally too. So the first thing we're going to talk about here is the CCAB, so the Consultative Committee of Accountancy Bodies. Whoops. So the CCAB is the kind of UK and Ireland group. So this is trying to ensure that the accountancy bodies for the UK and Ireland are able to speak with a unified voice. So there are 5 members, which of course include ICAW. We've got ICAS, ICAI, we've got ACCA, and we've got SIPFA. And there are representatives from each of these bodies within the CCAB, and as I said, they will discuss matters that affect the profession as a whole, and that means that we're able to present a unified voice as accountants. Internationally then, we've got the IFAC, so the International Federation of Accountants. This has 175 member organisations, again including the ICAW. And the aim of the IFAC then is to protect public interest. So we're trying to make sure that around the world there's a high level of accounting practice. And in particular, the IFAC emphasises the importance of strong international economies, adherence to high quality professional standards, so making sure that these key areas of audit, education, ethics and public sector financial reporting are really high. In addition to that, then the convergence of professional standards, so trying to avoid having 175 different sets of professional standards, but having overall international approach. They'll also speak out on public interest and public policy issues where the profession's expertise is most relevant, so they will have a voice within that environment. Okay. 1.3 then talks about who can call themselves an accountant, although it doesn't seem very fair, actually anyone is free to advertise as being an accountant, and they can provide the full range of accountancy services. The only time that that's not the case is in those 4 reserved areas that we looked at in the last chapter. So statutory audit, investment business, insolvency, and probate. So you can't go out and offer those unless you are a member of one of those bodies that we looked at in Chapter 9. Okay, so over the page, Section 2, we've spent a good chapter or so looking at why the accountancy profession is so important. We've looked at the different aspects of control, I guess, in terms of professional standards and accounting standards that we need to look at. Section 2 starts to look at regulation. Now, inevitably, when you have a profession with an importance such as the accounting profession, there has to be some sort of regulation. And as we've already seen, it's all really about protecting the public interest. So where the public is not necessarily as informed as the accountant, it's really important that regulation is there to ensure that we're behaving in the correct way. There's a few different ways in which you can have regulation. So the government itself can regulate directly via legislation. The government might decide that a separate body is more relevant, and therefore you've got what we'd call delegated legislation. So different agencies will establish legislation on behalf of the government. You might find that there's a certain level of self-regulation. We're going to come on and have a look at that in a second, and this is where the industry or the profession itself, there's interest there in terms of making sure that they regulate themselves, so they take it upon themselves to maintain that level of expertise. Or you might find a combination of all, and this is probably where the most effective legislation will come in. like I said, 2.3 then, self-regulation. Self-regulation is where there's an interest for everybody for the highest level of standards to be sustained. So everybody involved in the accounting profession wants the accounting profession to be high standards, and that's why self-regulation works. Now, self-regulation wouldn't work for every profession or every industry, and in fact we've got a few criteria here to think about the scenario or the circumstances in which self-regulation would work. So self-regulation only works if the regime does not seem to act against the public interest. So if we're all about trying to protect the public interest, we need to make sure that that's what we're trying to do. Regulatory guidance and its importance are both understood and enforced. So it's all very well having self-regulation, but if it's never enforced, then it's not very useful at all. It's essential that members buy in. You need that optimism and that kind of confidence in the self-regulation process in order for it to work, and there has to be some sort of oversight mechanism, so it's not just left to get on with it. And in fact, we're going to have a look at that next. So it's important, as the public are relying, or public interest relies on this self-regulation, and because it is self-regulation, so it's by the industry itself, it's really important that there's some sort of oversight, and it's really important that our oversight is independent of the profession or of the industry, to make sure that any accusations, for example, of self-interest are kind of redundant, so you can't have that as a criticism of the process. So absolutely sufficient independence, really, really important. Obviously has to have knowledge of the profession being regulated, so there's no point having an oversight that doesn't really know the ins and outs of what it's trying to look at. Has to be able to take a wide view, okay, so it's not focused on one particular stakeholder group more than another, and there has to be some sort of authority to do something, so there's no point having an oversight mechanism that's unable to kind of hand out punishments, for example. Now, the profession, in terms of the accountancy profession, is the conduct division, which is part of the FRC, which is where we get this oversight mechanism from. And over the page, we're going to have a look at the FRC in a bit more detail. The Financial Reporting Council then acts as the UK's independent regulator for corporate reporting and governance. And more specifically then, what does it do? It sets standards for corporate governance, financial reporting, audit and assurance and actuarial policy. It monitors the quality of audit and financial reporting in large entities. As said, regulates the audit profession, oversees self-regulation in the accountancy, audit and actuarial professions, and acts as the disciplinary body for the accountancy and actuarial professions. Again, there's not going to be a lot of kind of development of these points in the exam. You're just going to need to know that these are aspects of the Financial Reporting Council's remit. In terms of structure then, the FRC has two divisions. So we're going to have a look at those two divisions, the Conduct Division and the Codes and Standards Division, and we'll go through each one by one and just think about what role the FRC plays. Okay, so the Conduct Division, responsible for professional oversight, for discipline and for corporate reporting and audit review. So, professional oversight acts as the oversight mechanism for the regulation of audit, accountancy and actuarial professions, and seeks to promote high quality work. So this is one of those drivers behind ensuring we have really high standards of reporting and so on. Professional discipline then, so it has a disciplinary body independent of the accounting bodies themselves, and it will be able to take action where required when somebody has departed from best practice. And then finally we've got next to last, corporate reporting review via its financial reporting review panel. So it will make inquiries into any departures around the requirements for financial statements or anything in Companies Act 2006. It can seek voluntary remedial action, so it will voluntary removal, for example, corrective of comparative results in next year's financial statements. So if they found a departure, they can ask for that to be corrected in the next year's financial statements. Or if that doesn't work, they can apply for a court order for remedial action. So an action that has to be taken rather than the company volunteering to make the change. Finally, then in the conduct division, we've got the audit quality review. So as I said earlier, the conduct division is responsible for the oversight of regulation for audit, as well as this quality review should make sure that the quality of audits of listed and other major public interest entities are high quality. So making sure that we're maintaining those high standards with the audit profession. Okay, codes and standards division then it is going to be looking at exactly that. So standards around the different areas, so audit and assurance, reporting, corporate governance. Actuarial policy, making sure that they improve actuarial standards, so again promoting high quality actuarial practice. Same with audit and assurance, so making sure that standards for auditing and assurance are being developed, and making sure that the ethical standards for auditors are high level also. Accounting and reporting policy, so we'll amend any UK accounting and financial reporting standards. And then also finally with corporate governance, they're responsible for the UK Corporate Governance Code and the Stewardship Code. So we're going to have a look at that kind of idea of corporate governance in both chapters 11 and 12 then. Okay, that's the end of this recording then. We'll pick back up in the next section when we start to look at regulation of the accountancy profession. So we'll go through the different stages of regulation and discipline for accountants.